Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. Once again, I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by my good friend, Rivals.com national analyst Clint Cosgrove. Clint, like we always say, it's the best time of the week.
Best time of the week. We match today.
I know.
We're going to be awesome today. What a day it is.
Well, it's an excellent day, especially because we got we got two truly outstanding questions from the den this week that I think we're probably going to spend most of this episode on because there's a lot of meat on both of these bones. And I want to first shout out to Shootsman, who is always tearing it up with the questions. He wants to know what the ideal weekend is to host official visits. First weekend that it's possible to get first impression, last weekend to close out, be the last thing in their mind, or, fall officials against the top 25 team, but those seem to have gone out of style of late. Or is this just a case-by-case basis? Clint, tell us a little bit more about, sequencing, I guess, if you're a school for these officials.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to look at it. I think it depends on the school you're at. It depends on the type of kid you're recruiting. So there's so many variables. With the way things have gone, and this is kind of the post-COVID recruiting area, kids weren't allowed to go on visits. They weren't allowed to see schools. They saw their older friends not get that opportunity. So the first thing they did when, visits could open, everybody started going on unofficial visits. They're going to, tons of campuses. They're going on bus tours. They're seeing these schools over and over from a young age. And so, so there's a few ways to look at that because of it. All right. Is this a player who has already been up on campus? Okay. If they are, do we necessarily need to get that first crack at them? Or do we want the last crack, or do we want to show off our game day environment? Because to me, with Wisconsin, I think a big part of getting a recruit is getting them there for a game day. And so now if I'm Miami, I think the environment is blah. I'm probably trying to get them down there early before it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity. So maybe I'm getting them early on. So there's so many variables. I mean, when I was in Minnesota, we'd recruit these kids from Florida, and we didn't have summer official visits. We would literally come up with a plan how they'd be outside for like a total of 5 seconds, like getting to the to the car when they got to the airport. We'd funnel them inside, keep them underground, find indoor activities. So there's so many variables with it. To me, and the places I've been, game day experience is big. So I want a kid to come up. I want them to see what a game's like. I want to see them, how the kids interact after a game, how they hang out, the camaraderie and all that stuff. But if you've got a guy who, you're afraid that you might lose if you don't get the first crack, maybe they go down to Penn State or Texas A&M or Georgia and they get their socks blown off, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm done with officials. This is it. So you really got to look at the kid. You got to look at the environment that you're in, both weather-wise and, game day-wise, I think. And then you've got to look at the strategy part of it. Will a kid hold off long enough to give you the final shot, to give you the last visit? And nowadays, you don't even know if it's the last visit because they can go on as many as they want. So, yeah, it's a phenomenal question. Shootsman, we got to grab a beer sometime, because I want to pick your brain. But yeah, it's a great question with a lot of variables. I can't give you a straight up answer, but hopefully my multi-faceted answer gave you multiple answers to a question that isn't as simple as it sounds.
I have another variable to throw into the equation, and that is scheduling the officials with kids who are already committed, who are also coming on their officials, right? So you see in the Wisconsin case, Mabry Matower, quarterback, Matoyer. I don't know if I'm ever going to get this right. I think it's Matoyer, but I'm pretty much sure. Someone will correct me at some point. Is going to be there.
French. It's Matoyer.
Hey, listen, je parle français, donc c'est pas un problème pour moi. Little known fact,
French, actually.
I was a French major at UW.
Oh, wow. I can barely speak English.
Well, at least you speak football. Mabry Metelier will be on campus, I think, for whatever that June 2nd, something like that is. They've also got Darian Dupree coming that weekend. They've got other offensive commits that weekend. That also seems like a trend that is continuing, especially when you think about bringing the quarterback with the skill players.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you're spot on with that. I think that's, that all falls in with all those other variables, and it's just as important, if not more important, to get the guys around. Like if they get that family camaraderie, like feel like, I feel like the Michigan recruiting staff and the Notre Dame, not staff, class, and the Notre Dame class, those guys are like, they've got like the group text and it's lit. Like, so they're like always coming up with a plan and like scheduling their stuff to try to get others to join them. So I think that's a fantastic point, and another huge factor that you have to consider when scheduling official visits.
Yeah, and it's like the kids have to be networking with other recruits around the country to help get the class going. I'm not envious of that situation. So good for them, because I don't know. Well, I can't handle group text. It just, everything goes way too fast for me and for my slowly deteriorating brain. Okay. Second question. New member, ATL Badger, welcome to the den. He wants to know how he or she wants to know how college coaches project interior offensive linemen versus tackles at the high school level, because we see bigger and bigger, especially interior guys. Look at Joe Tippmann, right? 6'6", playing center, drafted in the early second round, and that is just not what football fans have been used to for decades, right? It's always sort of been like a V, going from these 6'8" tackles down to like a 6'1" center, right? And going back up with like 6'2", 6'3" guards. And, to finish out the question, like, assumption is that most high school coaches put their best lineman at tackle, and because it's rare to have sort of 1 to 2, it also seems rare at the high school level to have 1 to 2 college recruits on a single high school team. And so how much projection is done? Like, if you're assuming that the best lineman on most high school teams will probably be playing tackle, especially left tackle. How do you look at that? How do you look at tape versus rivals? What do you, footwork, mobility, communication skills, and sort of just any big picture offensive lineman projecting, and sort of how you look at that as a scout?
Yeah, so I'll work from the ground up, I guess. As a high school coach, you probably do put your most dominant player at tackle, because especially if you're going to be passing, or have him be a swing tackle, line up to wherever their dominant pass rusher, the opposing teams, is going to be. A lot of it can be body type. So at the high school level, it really depends. It's going to depend on your scheme. If I'm running, veer versus a wide open spread offense, different body types for different skill sets that are utilized within the offense. Now, typically, like you said, the V, the tackles were 6'7", the guards were 6'4", 6'5", and the center was 6'3", 6'2". You do still see a lot of that. Like Joe Tippmann, I went back to a tweet that I sent out when he got drafted in the draft. I was like, Wisconsin's getting a great one. I think he's going to be a very good player. And I put, he has a true OT frame in the tweet. And so I don't think I could have ever pictured him playing center. Now at the college level, there's a couple of ways to look at it. As a tackle, and you look at what's his name from Northwestern, who went in the first round.
Skarovsky.
He's a guard body. Yeah, Skarovsky. He's a guard body frame, but he's just so technical and athletic and physical that his footwork allows him to get away being a tackle, because typically the tackles have been those long and more athletic guys, because the defensive ends that they're going against that tee off on them are long, athletic guys. So the thought process behind that is then their pass blocking, they have best skill set, physical tools to keep those guys at bay, to use their leg, to get deep past that. Yet if they try to cross space, give an inside punch and everything like that. Now, on the guard and center positions, it has typically been a more sawed-off guy, a guy who's going to go against a more sawed-off body type. Your nose tackles, your three techniques, which tend to be a little longer. But that's why you saw centers being the most sought-off at all, because most of the defensive tackles were. So you're trying to kind of counter what is in front of you when doing the makeup of that offensive line. A 6'6" center, the reason you don't see that often is they have such long arms, and then they got to get that ball back, then get ready and pass set or run block right away. Now, I think it can almost be an advantage if you're in the shotgun and they're just throwing that ball back and they're already getting downhill on the block. That's where that 6'6" makes that a positive for the position. Now, if you're under center and things like that, it might be a little harder to have a 6'6" quarterback. So there's just all these variables. Like you look at Ohio State, they're taking, kind of in between guard, tackle, body types, and they're just looking for guys who can, switch and play across the board. They can plug and play. So I don't think the 6'6" offensive tackle has gone away, because your edge rushers are getting freakier by the year, longer by the year, and more athletic by the year. And so you're going to need a guy who can counter that size and really get depth and in their pass set, and also at the same time have the length to counter any move from one of these long athletic guys. The guards are typically in sometimes, especially in gap scheme plays, although you do see, OT pulls and stuff like that, even though it looks a little different. Your guards are usually a little squattier. They're really good laterally. They're working to pass off blocks, to see things coming their way, to pick up lift, to work double teams, and then go and block in space at the second level. For a tackle to block in the second level, who's 6'8", sometimes it's a little harder because they are so tall. And so they've got to come under control. It's a lot easier for a 6'3", 6'4" guard to double team and then work up to the second level, keep their base and block in space and come with a good punch. So there's so many variables. A lot of it is schematic. A lot of it is the offensive line coach's preference. There's some offensive line coaches that want 6'8" tackles, 6'6" guards, and 6'4" center, and they just want to be massive up front. There's some of those spread offenses like run and shoot, like the Mike Leach style run and shoot, where they're lining up with these wide splits, and really they just need to be able to get in the way and move laterally so that the ball can come out quick. And when they're running, then it's zone scheme, so they don't have to have a ton of length there. You want guys that can run and block in space. So a lot of it's schematic. I think in the NFL, you're going to continue to see, although you see guys like Skoronski, I do still see his highest upside at guard. I think he'd be a phenomenal guard or center. But he does have the athleticism to play tackle. But I think you're still going to see those 6'6" tackles, because really there's a bodyguard for those all-important quarterbacks that are getting paid so much money. And in a perfect world, I guess it's kind of like any other position, you want your biggest, longest, most athletic guy protecting the blind side of your quarterback, which is typically the left tackle. So I think that'll continue in the NFL. College, it's obviously schematic. It's, it has a lot to do with the individual skill set. Can they redirect if they are a tackle? And they do get back, deep in a pass set. If you're a gap scheme team, can they pull? Are they efficient? Are they a downhill blocker? Are they a mauler? So there's just so many things to think about. I could go on tangents upon tangents, which I already have, but it's a great question, and an offensive line coach could probably answer it a lot better than me. I would say if there was one position that I could not coach in football, it would be offensive line. It is such a technical position. I don't know enough about it. I know how to evaluate it. I know, schematically what's a fit for it, but as far as the nuances and the it's like I coach defensive backs. Like, they remind me of the DBs on offense. They've got to have a short memory. You're reacting. It's one of the one positions on offense a lot of the time, especially if you're in a pass that you're reacting, like a defensive back is reacting to a receiver. Now when it's run block, it's a little different because they've got a plan to go downhill and ear hole you. But so yeah, fantastic question though. Welcome, ATL Badger.
ATL Badger, yeah. And I want to go like you made me think of three different things there. And you talk about Ohio State and those bodies. Ian Moore, who we've talked about here before, does he fit that profile to a T? Like he could end up being a Skoronski at tackle, or he could end up being Quentin Nelson at guard. And I could see either of those things happening. I love that kid, but yeah, he could play literally. He could be Tittman. He could be any of those guys. He could play literally across the board. He's one of my favorite kids in the 2024 class at offensive line. B, I don't understand defensive backs. I feel like the only thing I kind of quasi understand at this point is offensive line. But that's probably just because I played a bunch of. I was an offensive lineman, and and C, to move that thought forward about the Badgers. You mentioned the schematic differences and moving to Phil Longo, a Leach-inspired scheme at the bare minimum, but one that isn't necessarily as pass heavy, right? It's much more balanced in terms of run pass typically under Longo schemes, but the linemen are going to be asked to do a lot of very different things, and so I think Wisconsin fans are going to be seeing some very different, but some different body types than they're used to seeing. We may not see as many giant, hulking, 340 pounds of thick boy, coming in.
Rich, steel, and sex appeal.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, maybe not as many of the large corn-fed guys that we are used to seeing as you were following. I just think it's going to be fascinating. I think, to me, that's the most interesting position to follow in this first Badger recruiting cycle for a variety of reasons. We've talked about, a couple big-name in-state kids have committed to Penn State. Nathan Roy, the other big in-state offensive lineman, is true national recruit at this point and is very coveted on the West Coast, and he's not a Wisconsin native in the same way. And so the Badgers, for their offensive line class, and this being Fick's first class, Longo's first class in this entire new offense, man, that's where I'm really interested to see who they are going after. That, to me, is the most fascinating storyline for this Wisconsin class in the rest of the 2024 cycle. So I'm just curious to see sort of what body types they are going after and how they are going to attack this position, because, if you read John's latest column, they're going to try to bring in 4 linemen in this class.
Yeah. I don't know how much the body types are going to change. You're maybe less maulers and stuff like that. I think it'll be similar to kind of like what you see at Tennessee. Tennessee still had those like bookend type tackles, but had big wide bodies on the interior. And what they did is, people don't realize, they just thought of them, they basically ran, 10 personnel steamers or 11 personnel down the field every single time, sending those guys on 4 birds and then breaking off their routes according to coverage. But what it does is it opens up run lanes when you do that, and you get 5-man box. And so I think you see a lot of that, not necessarily 10 personnel running 4 birds every time, but, Tennessee actually ran the ball, I think, more than they passed last year. It was crazy. And they run with such tempo, so they get these guys all gassed and they run up to the line and then they run zone right away. And so there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of different body types. There's a lot of different directions. To me, we'll see how it all plays out. I'm interested to see the body types that they go for as well, and what is expected from the offensive linemen moving forward.
Well, I'm excited to see what questions come for us next week, Clint. In the Badgers
those are
Den.
some fire ones.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So make sure everyone here is subscribed to BadgerBlitz, part of the Rivals.com network. Subscribe to Clint on social media at Rivals_Clint. We will be back next week. More Badger recruiting talk. And until then, we will see you guys in the den.
In the den.